Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Rogue One, a Star Wars story which, all against my expectations, I was actually very fortunate to have been able to see, and it was just all kinds of gangbusters. I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be a spoilery, semi-spoilery discussion of me just basically fanboying over this movie because I thought it was all kinds of awesome and thoroughly lived up to and exceeded expectations, knowing kind of what the story was going to be going into it, and it very much builds up right to the beginning of the original Star Wars film, A New Hope, as it would later be called. I still always want to refer to it as the original Star Wars movie, but later it took on the name A New Hope. It became Chapter 4 and everything like that, Episode 4. And this movie I loved it. It had sort of an RPG game aesthetic that it reminded me of in building the group of rebels who will eventually sort of take hold in this story and get those Death Star plans, in the idea of gathering together a kooky rogue band of misfits and everything like that. They're kind of breaking the rules by even going and trying to get the plans in the first place. Mon Mothma doesn't really want them to and all this kind of stuff, and they're just a ragtag group of characters that, unlike an RPG where you have 50 to 90 plus hours to really get to know them and everything like that, know the intricacies of who they are as people and everything. This is a 2-hour movie, so you don't get that in depth, but each one of them has something that makes them stand out from the crowd, that, makes them memorable and such like that. And it's very much about Jyn Erso and her father. They're kind of the clinchpin characters for the entirety of the story. Galen Erso, her father, was integral into finalizing the creation and formation of the Death Star. He was overseeing it. He didn't want anything to do with it any longer, and he basically decided to go into hiding with his wife and child. And eventually he's tracked down by the Empire in the form of General Krennic or Director Krennic, whatever his position was. I forget off the top of my head. But essentially, Jyn, from that very early age, she has to go into hiding and go on the run because her mother is murdered brutally right before her. And her father is effectively taken because they need him back to finalize and complete the Death Star. And so, you see Saw Gerrera, Forrest Whitaker's character, coming along and saving this child, giving her somewhat of a new life. I mean, she gets a new identity and everything. She probably had multiple. And I really loved Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso. She was, I consider her a doll. I'm smitten with her ever since being first debuted to her as an actress in Doctor Who, of all things, and to now see her in Star Wars where she's headlining. And she really runs the gamut of emotions from, the heart-stricken, losing her family, missing her father, all that stuff, being very rebellious and easily agitated, to the cause of doing something for the grander design, the greater picture, the idea of peace. There is this super weapon. We must do something about it. We must hold on to hope and all this kind of stuff. I love her portrayal as a strong female lead in this particular film. And she's definitely my favorite character in the movie. I almost went into it expecting I'd kind of have a childlike reaction where C-3PO was always my favorite character in the original Star Wars, and the droids and everything like that. And Luke was always my favorite character because he was sort of the, underdog hero in a sense. He, against all expectations, much as with myself in life, a lot of people held me down when I was a youth and said I would never amount to anything, and I overcame so many obstacles in my life. This is true for Luke. This is true for Daisy Ridley's Rey in The Force Awakens and things like that. I love that underdog story where a character can go further, much more beyond what anyone ever expected them to. And Jyn Erso's kind of like that. And the idea that these rebels, they get together and they're going to go and do what is necessary to eventually lead to the takedown of this cataclysmic, apocalyptic weapon, is just all kinds of awesome because nobody would have, looking at them, you have Donnie Yen playing a blind guy. He's one with the Force is one with him. But what's he gonna see? I mean, there's even a point where they put a bag over his head. He's like, seriously? I'm blind. What can I do? But you see that he's a badass. You see that he can throw stormtroopers around with the best of them. His buddy, who's, I'm not sure the character's name or the actor's name, have yet to learn it, but the fact that they are simpatico, they are a team and everything like that, how much they mean to each other. I think there's some dialogue from Cassian Andor to suggest that they were former monks of the whole Jedi thing. I don't know if they're an offshoot of that or not, but they are definitely among the rebel mindset against the Empire, and they are endearing characters for that. They kind of hail back to like these classic samurai sort of stories, and again RPG aesthetic stories, where you have characters that have these goofy sort of, you know, defying expectations, things about them. And they are fast friends and compatriots of Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor. Cassian Andor, you know, Diego Luna's character being very much, I was actually surprised to see that at first you're not sure if you like him. And I thought I would like him immediately from the outset going into the film. And then I was kind of like, wow, I don't know if I actually do like this guy. He's sent on a mission to murder Jyn Erso's father, effectively, because they feel like they got to take him out. He's the one who's going to make this Death Star operable, and if they can remove him from the equation, well, then the Empire's not going to be able to do anything about it. Very ignorant is that particular mindset, but I love that, you know, we see Cassian unable to pull the trigger during one of those clinchman moments, where he basically has, you know, a Galen Erso right in his line of sight. And this is when everything is catching up on Galen Erso, for all intents and purposes, right before his untimely demise, being just briefly reunited with his daughter and everything like that. But the message is clear. You know, Galen it's him. He's the one who's solely responsible for creating that orifice, if you will, that would eventually lead to Luke firing in the hole and blowing up the entire Death Star. It's him who, you know, put that into the works and kept that hidden for so many years, because he knew they would go and find other experts. The Empire would find their aficionados who could put this thing together, maybe more willingly, maybe not, maybe at the twisting of arms and the threat of you know, holding families hostage, who knows. But the fact of the matter is, he would be, you know, sort of exploited to his ends, and then he would be sent packing. Or if he went willingly, he could, you know, sabotage it from within and keep that hidden. And it does, unfortunately, all effectively catch up to him with Krennic coming calling. And there is a whole back and forth that, as I understand from watching the Collider Jedi Council, which I haven't watched in a little while now, but they were saying in build up to this film, there are some novels that basically show the backward and forward chess game going on between Krennic and Grand Moff Tarkin, who are both, you know, basically challenging each other for the supremacy of their positions in you know, the creation of the Death Star, in the running of it, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm very intrigued to eventually go read those novels and see just how far down the rabbit hole that goes. But they're very much in this film against each other. They are opposing sides of the same coin, and the CG was very interesting, I have to say, as someone who admired what they did in Tron Legacy, you know, with Jeff Bridges de-aging him, making him look younger as the character of Flynn and everything. I was impressed with that. But anytime you had him in the real world where he's dealing with other real human beings, it didn't quite mesh. And then when you had him consequently in the grid, in the virtual world, I could swallow it that much easier, because all of it is supposed to be sort of CG and virtual and whatever like that. And in the case of this film, I kind of feel like with Tarkin and with Princess Leia, who we see toward the very end, there's still that level of, I know it's fake, you know, I just, the way the mouths move and everything like that, it just doesn't quite have a realistic view in the way they do that. You know, you can still see the uncanny valley, that it's not real. It's trying its hardest, but I feel like it could have just been that much better. It wasn't pitch perfect, but it was still absolutely mind-blowingly insane. This character, who we never really knew a whole hell of a lot about. We only see him in A New Hope being malevolent and things of that sort, but, you know, all that screen time is all we ever knew of this character of Tarkin. And now we have so much more that we see in, you know, he's not only against the rebel movement and all this kind of stuff. He's not only about running this giant apocalyptic weapon. He's also very dastardly, kind of like the mirror universe aesthetic from Star Trek, where everyone's cutthroat against even their own side. And that's very much the relationship going on with Tarkin and, as I say, Krennic. And I loved it. I loved being able to see this character again. And it was kind of chilling, being able to see this character, and it's not recast. It's not another actor. It's very interesting how they managed to accomplish that in the end. And, I loved talking about other characters. I loved K2SO, which, again, I thought he was going to be like my favorite character, like C-3PO, R2-D2, the droids, as a kid. Even now, I finally tracked down, as of the time of this recording in the last week or two, through Amazon, paid a little more than I would have off the store shelves, but I finally tracked down a Black Series New Hope C-3PO figure, and it was like answering to my childhood nostalgia, because one of my first ever action figures, one of my first ever collectibles in life as a small child, was an original 1977 Kenner C-3PO figure. And I have been looking all my life for sort of the perfect modern equivalent of that. I've gone through several figures of C-3PO through my years, all of which have either been lost to time or had been purged when I thought I had to grow up and get rid of childish things and all this kind of stuff. And I regretted every single one of them. Or in the case of my very first figure, I took a candle to it because I wanted to see what happened if you lit a metal man on fire, not realizing as a kid it's plastic and paint, So, I mean, I still have that childlike fascination for Star Wars and the droids and all that stuff, the world, the environment, and this movie exploits all of that. I love the fact that you see cameos that lead directly into A New Hope from the sort of two pirate guys that Luke encounters in the cantina with Obi-Wan. He disarms one of them very literally in the original Star Wars film. Effectively, it's the guy who's telling Luke to look out. He has the death sentence on 12 systems. You better watch yourself, that guy. You see him and his compatriot run into Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor. And that to me was awesome. I mean, there are a lot of little things like that throughout the course of the film. C-3PO and R2-D2, speaking of the droids, they do show up briefly just as the climax of the film is about to take effect, where they're going and trying to get those plans. And the whole rebel movement, when they realize, oh, we have a sort of splinter cell that went in against orders, we better go and have their backs because maybe they're going to accomplish something. And you have some great sort of cameos again of original Star Wars New Hope actors used in footage previously unseen on the cutting room floor from the original New Hope film and all that kind of stuff. And it just gave me goosebumps and chills all the way through. I mean, this is how you do a throwback movie. You don't have to retell A New Hope entirely. And again, this isn't to dismantle or disrespect The Force Awakens. I love that movie for what it was, but I feel like this one was even that much better. In the pacing, in the kind of characters it got together, it wasn't beating you over the head with the humor as they did with the Finn character, which was even now, was a big sort of dislike of mine in The Force Awakens. A lot of his dialogue and acting kind of, humorously pedantic. Just, it went a little too over the top in places. And for me, this movie, the comedy was that much better paced and a little more subtle and things like that. Didn't quite beat you over the head. And Darth Vader, man. I mean, this is Vader at his most... If I called Grand Moff Tarkin malevolent and a force to be reckoned with, a sort of chess-playing master going against Krennic, we see Vader at his most malevolent, at his most lethal. And it was just awe-inspiring to see, even though I would be on the side of the rebels in that particular predicament, to see him throwing down. I mean, the arm goes up, he sends a guy that way. The arm goes down, he sends a guy that way. He sends a guy toward the wall, he's got his lightsaber out, and he is just nuking the entire cast of rebels before him. And only just barely, at the end of the film, does the blockade runner get that message, just barely sent through sort of the protective barrier, the shielding that they have to break through, kind of like the thing with Return of the Jedi, the barrier around the moon of Endor and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, here we are building up to this idea that the Death Star is about to become active. We see that it can cause planet-wide catastrophe before it actually destroys Alderaan in A New Hope, because it's not at full power. The whole idea is getting it to full power, and by the time the original Star Wars takes place, it has gotten to that point. But to see that Leia was there in the action, you know, they were there at this planet. 3PO, R2, Leia, all these rebel characters, it literally, like, as that ship light speeds off, it's heading toward Tatooine, and you can immediately pop in Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, and boom, you're continuing the story from right where this film leaves off. And it is somewhat sad, I have to say, that all of these main characters die. This was something that the Collider Jedi Council guys have been saying for a very long time, and I wanted to hold out hope that, well, you never know, maybe one or two of the characters might survive. But the question remains, if they had, why would we never have seen them cropping up in the original Star Wars trilogy? So you have to bang on with the unfortunate, you know, appraisal, well, they're not going to survive this adventure. They're not going to survive this journey. And none of them did. They all went out in their own ways heroic. And from Donnie Yen going out to activate the master switch, to the communications panel, the cat who was the defector pilot, you know, in his, by the way, first encounter with Saw Gerrera with the breathing apparatus, it was all kinds of terrifying that he's reminded of. You hear the Vader breathing, and he's reminded of Vader in that moment. But to see him going out, you know, I would have assumed he would be okay. You know, he didn't quite get out of that ship before it got blown to hell. And then, of course, with the Death Star firing, I mean, at first you think Cassian's been taken out because Krennic gets a shot in at him, but at the last second he manages to catch up with Erso and Krennic when Krennic's going to kill Erso and all this stuff. And, you know, you see them. Arguably, it's kind of like the Han-Leia romance thing. Maybe there are feelings between them, but it never comes to fruition. It's skirted. And it doesn't have to bang you over the head with it. These people care about each other when it comes to, you know, the entire group of rebels, but most specifically Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso. And they kind of die arm in arm. And it's so bittersweet. It's like they accomplished this, you know, incredible goal that would see to the first leg of wiping out the Empire and the imperial rule of the Emperor and all that kind of stuff. They were the clinchpins to that entire affair. Without them, Luke never would have been taken off Tatooine, maybe, probably. Without them, there would have been no hope for Leia and the Rebel movement, the Rebel Alliance, to ever have any hope of, you know, trying to push back against the Empire and all this kind of stuff. Mon Mothma, all of these characters, it was a majestic film, a mesmerizing film, telling a chapter of the story I never maybe knew how much I wanted to know. I was always curious about. It's kind of like that lost era of Star Trek, if you've never read novels and things of that sort. Christopher Pike, looking at the original pilot, The Cage, always fascinated me. And, you know, eventually Jeffrey Hunter, the character, or rather the actor who played that character, would leave, and they would get William Shatner. They would reformat the show because of CBS and their brouhaha, thinking it was too cerebral and all this stuff. In any case, you know, I digress. In a nutshell, it was an untapped era of Star Trek that I was always highly curious about. And that's very much what this movie answers. A very curious segment of Star Wars history. How did they get those plans? Who were the people who did it? How did they manage to come together? You know, were they going against rules? Were they breaking rules to do it? Were they following orders? All this kind of stuff. And we get to know them in this film, and it's gangbusters. It's just all kinds of awesome. I mean, I can't wait to see the movie again 20 times. You know, I can't wait to own it and all that kind of stuff. And just everyone in this film, you know, I still have yet to learn all of their names, but Felicity Jones, you know, Donnie Yen, Diego Luna, all of our main characters, you know, the characters who are holdovers from the original Star Wars. As I say, those two pirate characters, Mon Mothma, C-3PO, R2-D2, those, you know, X-Wing and Y-Wing fighter pilots toward the end. It is very much set within, very familiarly so, the fabric of Star Wars, the original trilogy of Star Wars most specifically. It can be new, but it feels like it's ages old. It feels like, you know, it fits right in with that classic trilogy. And I can't spout off any more superlatives about it. I could bang on and on and on. And I'm just going to keep reiterating the fact that I loved it, how awesome it was. And yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a shame we'll never get a continuation with these characters, but arguably you don't really need it. You saw their entire stories, their entire adventure come full circle by the end. And now it goes on to grander things with the Skywalker saga and the whole taking down of the Empire, all that stuff. And holy hell, what a movie. So I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you've seen Rogue One, a Star Wars story, if you loved it as much as I did, if you were sort of in that middle ground gray area of, well, it's good, but it's not great, or if you downright hated it, if you loathed it, if it was another reason for you to, you know, put a notch on your belt for disdaining anything sci-fi, fantasy-esque, Star Wars-esque, if it wasn't your papa's Star Wars or whatever, let me know. Anything goes in the comments below. And so, yeah, otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. May the Force be with you all, and I'll catch you later. Peace.